The scene shifts to Frontier County, approximately 10 kilometers to the north. There is a sludge disposal plant, and Lloyd Frontier instructs Peapodum to open the lid, which he promptly does. Lloyd Frontier bows in front of Solidas and states that he will be counting on him. Solidas agrees, stands on the edge of the sludge, performs a magic spell, and thinks come on up, Thesis, as he transforms into a dragon once again. He observes him and contemplates that the world will eventually learn of the story of a dragon who willingly utilizes his powers. The dragon hurls fire into the sludge with full force, purifying the water. Lloyd Frontier reflects on the notion that, for the sake of humanity's hygiene, the legend of the Thesis annihilating dragon, Solidas, will be known. Solidas replies, "Don't tell anyone about it," questioning what this is all about. Lloyd Frontier responds, asking if it isn't cool, a Thesis annihilating dragon. Solidas questions if he's serious, stating that he has 0 sense in naming things. Meanwhile, it couldn't be helped that he was a science major, and the system notified that all science majors worldwide had expressed disapproval. He successfully established the first collective waste system for the Laurasia continent, and thanks to him, the concept of public health is beginning to take shape. The system notifies him that he should choose between the red tissue or the blue tissue for a new title. He believes the title's effect is a 0% chance of infectious diseases occurring in his county, and he can effectively block diseases from entering the county. He believes he can now live with peace of mind. When Javier inquires about his plans to depart for Namoran, he responds that he would like to leave as soon as possible. He reflects on the idea that leaving without making any plans and gaining nothing would be a waste of traveling expenses. He contemplates that this place might harbor a villain, even though he claims it lacks credibility unless there's a decent excuse. Javier says, "Master Lloyd, look over there. What's all that?" as he observes numerous carriages. Lloyd replies, expressing a sense of foreboding about the recently rejected marriage proposals. He approaches his father, who explains that all the suitors sent their daughters, hoping that seeing them in person might change Lloyd's mind. Unable to refuse, he provided accommodations for them. His father shows him a card, indicating that he made number cards for the sequence of ladies who will be meeting him. Lloyd questions if his father is perhaps excited right now, but his father denies it. He simply expresses his desire for Lloyd to marry the person he loves, adding that, at his age, he should already have grandchildren. He reassures Lloyd that the whole continent is wondering if something is wrong with his eldest son, but he insists that he's fine. The system notifies Udid Nukrantara is his new title name. He feels excited because it's been a while since someone made fun of him. He guesses that there are ladies queuing up to marry him. As he reflects, he decides to think it over carefully. It's not really the ladies, but their fathers, old men, are queuing up to be related to him, indicating that he's loved by older men. A servant enters and informs him that the first lady is entering. A girl enters the room and Lloyd Frontier greets her, saying nice to meet her, Miss Customer, though he means Miss. She looks at Javier and questions why the servant is sitting down while he's standing up. Lloyd Frontier responds, stating that it's because he's Lloyd. Perplexed, she asks what he is saying, to which he replies that he's Lloyd, bids her goodbye, and she exits. After a while, another girl enters as the servant announces the arrival of the second lady. Lloyd greets her, and she repeats her desire to marry him. She questions why the servant is sitting while he is standing. Lloyd reiterates that it's because he's Lloyd, bids her goodbye, and she leaves, visibly upset. Javier expresses his boredom, and Lloyd apologizes, stating that he is adept at understanding reality. The servant announces the entrance of the third lady, and Lloyd greets her as well. As he looks at her, he realizes she seems familiar. Reflecting on the illustration of the Iron Blood Knight, he recognizes her as Siluria Namoran, the eldest daughter of Count Namoran. Lloyd is taken aback, thinking that Siluria, who had been dating Javier, was expected to be a fixed heroine. However, he recalls that she sacrificed her life to protect the people of Namoran, leading Javier to experience heartbreak and shed tears at her untimely demise. He reflects that the readers became agitated in the comments afterward, deeming it too harsh. People questioned why everyone Javier loved and cherished met unfortunate ends. Many readers were drawn to this novel because the protagonist consistently experienced sadness and loneliness, setting it apart from other novels. She acknowledges that she knew it was disrespectful, but she came due to her father's persistence. She notes that he looks much better than she had heard. Lloyd apologizes, clarifying that he is Lloyd, not the person behind him. She responds, asking for pardon, but she is addressing him. She points out that the person behind him is the renowned swordmaster Sir Javier Asrahan. Both Lloyd and Javier express surprise. She takes a seat in front of them and observes that it seems Javier has been troubled by marriage matters, suggesting that he must be too busy to think about marriage now. Javier queries how she knows that. She mentions that she observed it on her way here, noticing the construction of buildings she had never seen before and the development of clean roads in all directions. She remarks that he must be busy supervising all of that, given that she knows his goals. She indicates her intention to take her leave and rises from her seat. He refuses, requesting her to wait a minute, expressing his desire to talk to her for a while. He inquires if Namaran is currently facing any difficulties, such as a sudden influx of people. She complies, sits back down, and questions how he knows about it. He explains that around 4,000 refugees arrived in Namaran due to losing their homes in monster attacks, and according to his knowledge, someone brought them to Namaran. He curses internally, realizing that the barrier of Namaran is a spell designed to drain the life force of the people within it. The barrier was activated because the refugees fulfilled the required number of people for the activation of Canavero's magic. He reflects that despite efforts to gather everyone into their county, there were still refugees who reached Namaran, aligning with Cannavaro's plans as per the novel. He contemplates the grim outcome. If his plans proceed, thousands of Namaran's people will be sacrificed as offerings, and the Hell Knight, a harbinger of death, will be summoned. Considering the story's setting, he acknowledges that not even a high sword master can defeat a Hell Knight, as its existence is nearly equivalent to that of a god. This realization means he cannot prevent the annihilation of the entire area, and the situation is far worse than his initial concerns. Lloyd front row prepares for a work trip, and Javier approaches with a bucket filled with love letters. Lloyd questions why Javier isn't getting ready for the trip and what he has in the bucket. Javier responds that they are letters given to him by the ladies, and he plans to put them in his room first. Lloyd inquires about the content of the letters, and Javier casually mentions they are, of course, love letters. Javier comments that Lloyd didn't receive any, and Lloyd agrees. Javier places the bucket on the ground, takes out one letter, and offers it to Lloyd with a smile. Lloyd questions why Javier would give him something that belongs to him and urges him to get prepared quickly. Lady Siluria waits and walks away as Javier places the letter on the ground. After some time, they all sit in a carriage and head to Namaran. She inquires of Siluria Namaran whether she is a civil engineer. He confirms, stating there are a few types, and he will decide which to use after assessing the situation. She asks how he is aware of all the circumstances in their county. He explains that he simply inferred it from information gathered from others, given that Namaran is a city constructed on steep terrain, and it's natural for the sides to erode gradually. She expresses her gratitude for meeting him, even though they didn't marry as her father desired. He reassures her that he is pleased they can address the concerns that have plagued their family for generations. He considers the situation perfect, providing an opportunity to investigate Cannavaro and also earn some money through construction. He anticipates that this work trip will be productive, assuring others to wait for him as he plans to demonstrate the meaning of the phrase, "the first to strike wins." She observes Mr. Ken's Cannavaro, a business owner, using his own money to assist 400 refugees and consistently taking a prominent role in helping others even with small gestures. He gazes at a man selling bread, notices the logo on his shirt, and identifies him. Filled with anger, he considers him a hypocritical individual and vows to crush him like a crushed aluminum can, grinding his teeth in frustration. Count Namaran acknowledges that he must be tired from the long journey, praising the noble demeanor he exudes, foreseeing the Namaran family reaching even greater heights. He laughs as he approaches Javier, expressing the sentiment that, in light of the occasion, they should discuss a suitable day for the wedding. She responds, "Father, that's the bodyguard, Sir Javier, and Lord Lloyd is the person beside him." Count Namaran questions what she is saying, expressing confusion about the contrasting demeanor of the person on the left, overflowing with nobility, and the one on the right, who appears lacking in several aspects. She calls him rude and questions how a count like himself cannot recognize the true essence of a person. She acknowledges that Lord Lloyd may seem lacking in some aspects, but he is very wise and capable, emphasizing that he is not present for marriage matters. Her father wonders why Lord Lloyd is there, and she explains that he is there to help resolve the issue of their county's sidelands crumbling. Her father expresses relief, mentioning that he feared being embarrassed by his son-in-law's appearance. She addresses her father, expressing that his words are hurtful and inquiring if he can imagine the suffering Lord Lloyd may have endured receiving such treatment over time. She questions if Lord Lloyd is genuinely capable of stabilizing the slopes. Affirming her belief in his abilities, she suggests that they will provide the necessary manpower and materials, and he only needs to supervise the process. Her father raises concerns about the potential cost and the stability of the slopes. She reassures him, stating that if stabilization proves unsuccessful, she will compensate Lord Lloyd with 3 times the money spent on construction. Intrigued, her father looks at Lord Lloyd and requests details about the construction. Lord Lloyd, in anger, grabs Javier by the neck with his shovel. Confused and concerned, her father questions their actions, expressing a lack of understanding. They retire to their rooms for some rest that night. After some time, Lloyd Frontra inquires if Javier also observed the demon pattern on the shoulder of the individual in question. Javier confirms and specifies that it was a goat head. Lloyd declares that he will monitor Canavero. If they can establish that the pattern is linked to black magic and report the incident to Count Namaran, they can apprehend them all at once without taking direct action. Javier acknowledges his understanding of the plan. Lloyd questions why Javier looks so cheerful when discussing a serious matter. Javier apologizes, explaining that he was recalling the recent comment made by Count Namaran about him lacking in several aspects. Enraged, Lloyd attempts to punch Javier repeatedly, but Javier manages to evade every attack. The following morning, Lloyd Frontra ventures into the city and notices a gathering of people at a certain location. A person announces that everyone is free to choose anything, emphasizing that each piece is worth 200 copper, encouraging them to select whatever they desire. Observing this, Lloyd thinks, damn it, that pattern is being sold in the market, as he notices shirts with the particular pattern being offered for sale. Realizing the potential complications this presents, he becomes concerned. Javier addresses him as Master Lloyd, and he inquires if Javier found anything suspicious. Javier denies finding anything noteworthy, stating that all he observed was the individual sincerely helping the refugees. Javier adds that he intended to investigate the person's residence, but found it protected by an expensive magical lock. Although it would be easy to destroy it, he refrained from doing so, fearing immediate discovery. Javier explains that the pattern is meant to signify a wandering minstrel, as that individual is currently quite popular. He mentions that large cities are selling clothes featuring that pattern. He contemplates the necessity of finding the wandering minstrel and inquires about the process. However, he realizes that searching for the minstrel may jeopardize everything if Namaran's barrier is deployed in the meantime. Considering the lack of details in the novel regarding the magic used for the barrier, he acknowledges the difficulty in finding and preemptively stopping it. He ponders whether entrusting Javier to deal with the barrier is the only option despite the potential risk to Siluria's life. The thought of someone he knows dying is something he wishes to avoid. Recalling the term Grandmaster from the novel, he recognizes it as an entity surpassing even a sword master in power, a being capable of instantly eliminating the barrier and the Hell Knight. However, lacking knowledge of the theory, he acknowledges the impossibility of training Javier to become one. Javier suggests looking into Canavero, suspecting hidden secrets due to the powerful lock in use. Lloyd raises concerns about the risk of getting caught while breaking the lock. Javier reassures him, asserting that he has a reliable method to enter and guarantees success. Lloyd is urged to trust him and wait for him at their current location. Lloyd Frontra considers the necessity of anchors to prevent the slopes from collapsing, planning to drive them deep into the ground to fortify the terrain. He originally intended to use the shape of a wedge-lock bolt. However, the challenge lies in the need for more technology to create an intricate helix. He dispatches a messenger pigeon carrying a message. He decides to send the blueprint to Corgidus first, realizing it will take some time to reach him. During this period, he anticipates that Corgidus will scrutinize and study the terrain. Lloyd steps outside and observes 2 people conversing while walking. One of them asks if the other also saw the new beauty at the distribution station. The other confirms, stating that everyone rushed over to catch a glimpse of her face. The first person exclaims about her exceptional body, and the second person agrees, noting that her physique is indeed attractive. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontra eavesdrops on their conversation, questioning why they would discuss such matters in the middle of the street for everyone to hear. He learns about a beauty running a distribution station in Cannavaro, a detail not present in the novel, considering it might be one of the variables that he should investigate. Observing the crowd gathered to see the beauty, he decides to check it out. As he maneuvers through the crowded place, he apologizes and tries to move forward. People in the crowd express admiration for the beauty's body. To his surprise, he spots Javier transformed into a girl and selling something. Recognizing Javier, he uses sign language to convey his respect for Javier's preferences. Javier responds in sign language, clarifying that it's not a fetish but a part of his operation. Lloyd looks at him once more before walking away. Javier gazes at Cannavaro, who whispers about the progress of the preparations. The vegetable seller responds that they completed all of them last night, and then Cannavaro walks away. After a while, Lloyd Fronterer reaches a high mountain and attempts to climb it. He plans to inspect the expected rupture line first, but he notices a skeleton's head there. He wonders what the bone is and questions if someone died there in the middle of the construction work. He dismisses the idea, realizing it has been recently buried, and examines the skeleton's details with his powers. Looking around, he wonders where the body is and why only the skull is visible. He discovers another skeleton's head and thinks there is one more over there. All three of them are buried 50 centimeters into the ground as he measures the distance through his skills. He ponders if it could be a deliberate occurrence, as the distance between each skull is exactly the same, suggesting they have been buried around the peak. On the other side, Cannavaro and his team members gather for a meeting, and he commends everyone, expressing satisfaction with their efforts. He asserts that their grand plans will unfold as scheduled. Lloyd Frontera observes dark magical waves emanating from the skull and realizes that black magic has been cast on the skull. This black magic is what will activate Namuran's barrier. On the other side, Cannavaro wickedly smiles and declares their actions are for the descent of the Hell Knight. Lloyd Frontera becomes enraged, stating that their plans are jeopardized. He absorbs the skull's powers and purifies them, noting the successful purification of one skull. He holds the purified skull in his hands and contemplates its significance. A gemstone emerges from the skull, leading him to believe that the skulls served as containers, and this gemstone appears to be the actual item for the sorcery. Holding it, he questions whether it is some jewel and proceeds to scan it. He ponders what this is as he notices an estimated value of 5 million for the jewel. He calculates that it is equivalent to Sir Bayern's annual salary. Wondering if the other buried skulls also have such jewels, he begins digging. Amused, he laughs and exclaims at the unexpected windfall, finding money in the places he excavates. The message window points out his heightened excitement, remarking on his focus being more on obtaining money than preventing the barrier's deployment. He dismisses the notion of the barrier, declaring it as money, free money. The message window responds with information about a skill level up, specifically the Asrahan Core Technique Triple Circle Level 3. He calculates a total of 30 and concludes that he now possesses the power of 30 Bayerns. As he fills a bag with jewels, he realizes it cannot contain the wealth. Delighted, he contemplates having enough money to make 30 Bayerns his slaves. He remembers that Bayern often coughs excessively, prompting him to say, "Please rest for some time. He's overworking himself." He exclaims, "Damn, that was so satisfying," and decides to raise Bayern's salary a little, planning to make him work for 20 years. In doing so, he believes Bayern will accomplish the equivalent of 30 years' worth of work during that time, and he chuckles at the idea. Moving to another skull, he questions how it ended up being used for such sorcery, pondering whether it met a natural death or was a result of murder. Regardless of the circumstances, he expresses gratitude for the blessings, bowing in front of the skull. Holding it in his hand, he promises to take it to a place filled with sunlight, hoping it can now rest in peace. He proceeds to gather all the skulls in a bag. Lloyd Frontera and Javier sit in their room at night, and Javier explains the reason he was dressed in a particular way. However, Lloyd refuses, claiming he already knows it all. He asserts that all humans are diverse, and not everyone can be understood because everyone has their own preferences. Lloyd adds that he understands Javier's unique preferences. Javier mentions that the entire city is aware he is a knight from a foreign land and needs to disguise himself to gather more details. Lloyd reassures him, stating that he already knows everything. Curious, Lloyd asks when Javier discovered his preferences, prompting Javier to shout that it's not the case. Confused, Lloyd questions why Javier is getting angry and whether having such preferences is bad. He wonders if Javier is looking down on everyone in the world who shares that preference. In response, Javier says that, regardless, he managed to enter the mansion on an errand while working at the distribution point. Meanwhile, he responds, "Is that so? Did he find anything beneath the mansion?" There was another door that led underground. Javier explains that initially when he observed Cannavaro, he believed there could be no one kinder and more diligent than him. He continues, stating that's why he considered it a mistake to suspect Cannavaro. However, upon discovering hidden layers of doors, he acknowledges that his instincts were right this time. Javier asserts that he will obtain the evidence no matter what he has to do. He replies, "All right, this is why he should trust his words and be proud of his preferences." Javier insists that he is trying to convey that's not the case. On the other side, Cannavaro angrily declares that all the Nectanium has disappeared. One of his team members reports that someone took every single one of them, while another mentions that this development has spoiled their grand plans. Cannavaro contemplates whether someone knew of his plans, but dismisses the idea, thinking that if that were the case, they would have come after him. He taps his hand on the table in frustration, realizing it might have been discovered by coincidence. An old man expresses his anger, questioning what Cannavaro plans to do, emphasizing that everyone gathered there because he assured them nothing would go wrong with the plan. Another person, with a scarred face, mentions that they invested a considerable amount of money based on his promise that the Dark Sorcerers would recreate the world, urging him to take responsibility for the situation. Cannavaro attempts to calm them down, urging them not to worry. He claims to have a plan and mentions that Nectanium serves as a substitute item for emergency situations. He reassures them that if everyone cooperates just this last time, the descent of the Hell Knight will proceed as planned. After a while, a water bucket falls on Javier, prompting another girl to exclaim, "Goodness, Miss Javier, what happened to him?" Javier explains that his hand just slipped. The girl suggests that Javier should go and change his clothes in the guest room that Sir Cannavaro has in his mansion, adding that all the men are staring at her. Javier agrees and says all right, while the men look at him and comment on her impressive body. Javier reaches the guest room and requests the guard to open the gate. The guard, impressed by her body, responds with admiration. Javier enters the guest house and changes clothes, thinking that he should be able to move around with ease now. To control his mana and fully hide his presence, he decides to let go. He jumps out of the window, moves forward stealthily, thinks about the door leading to basement level 2, and wonders how he can open that door. He gazes at Cannavaro and performs a magic spell, creating circles at the lock of the door, and successfully opens it. Javier considers that it's a different lock compared to the main gate, and it can only be opened by a certain sequence of mana. Meanwhile, Lloyd Fronterer examines the bag of jewels and wonders if this is really all, speculating that there might be more buried in another location. He contemplates the possibility of activating Namoran's barrier with those jewels and resolves not to let it happen, deciding to search for more free money. The message window advises against using them for black magic tools, but Lloyd sees it as an opportunity for free money. Cannavaro enters the room, and Javier watches him closely. Javier follows behind and checks the room's lock. Using his magical circle magic, he believes it's definitely something like this and successfully unlocks the door. He enters as well and descends the stairs, encountering a long hallway where an undead charges towards him with the intent to attack. Javier counterattacks, delivering a punch that creates a hole in the undead's body, but it has no effect. The undead retaliates with a punch of its own, leading Javier to realize that it's not a normal undead. It operates on a completely different level compared to the ones he encountered in the valley. Seeing numerous undead approaching, he quickly retrieves small fork-like knives from his pocket and skillfully employs his abilities, confirming his suspicions about Cannavaro. Javier prepares to confront the undead, while behind them, a bald person stands at another gate, enters, and closes the door. Javier thinks the person looks like someone words could work on. He attacks the undead, slicing them into numerous pieces and breaking the wall in the process. He enters the room where the bald person went and throws him aside. The bald person pleads for mercy, and Javier mentions he has a question. He puts his foot on the person's leg, breaking it, causing him to cry out in pain. Javier warns that if there's even a moment's hesitation in the reply, the other leg will suffer the same fate. He asks about Cannavaro's schemes in this place. The bald person responds that he doesn't know the details. He's just following orders as an undertaker hired by Mr. Fall Cannavaro. He explains that he processes the corpses brought by Cannavaro through chemical means and is suddenly instructed to guard the place. Javier inquires about the source of the corpses, causing the bald person to become scared. The person explains that the corpses come from the trading post, where they send the bodies of refugees who died from illnesses. Javier remembers his plan to move his father to the trading post for treatment, feeling grateful for the potential improvement in his father's health. She expresses her thanks with a bow, and Javier thinks about the corpses, the skulls with jewels that Master Lloyd Frontera discovered, and all the undead he has cut down. Javier questions whether the bald person found it strange that the trading post kept sending corpses here. He declares the person an accomplice, breaking the person's other leg. Javier moves quickly, anticipating the discovery of their underground room. He considers the urgency of informing Master Lloyd and devising a countermeasure against their actions. After a while, Javier arrives home and calls Master Lloyd, realizing he has no time to waste searching for him. He takes his sword and quickly heads out, determining that he must make a decision and take action. He decides to attack Cannavaro by himself, thinking about Cannavaro and the others who discuss things he couldn't understand, speculating that they were all from the trading post. Believing the trading post to be their base, he breaks a window to enter and looks around, finding it empty. He concludes that the trading post, once filled with people, is now vacant, making him suspect that they have initiated some undisclosed activity. Entering a room, he encounters a black magic cloud, feeling a sudden weakness as if his strength is draining rapidly. Puzzled by the situation, he goes outside and observes a black magic cloud shield enveloping the entire city. His sword also loses its powers, and he realizes that mana is rapidly being drained from everyone. People collapse to the ground, and he worries about Master Lloyd, fearing for his safety. Siluria Namoran looks out of a window, witnessing people dying. She rushes to go outside, unsure of what is happening but determined to help. The person with a scar on their face stands outside the city, casting a magic spell and believing that the Nectanium and the spell given by Cannavaro are effective. They anticipate the descent of the Hell Knight upon the city, leading to the world becoming theirs. Despite this conviction, the person wonders about the mysterious identity of the guy involved in these events. Lloyd Frontera approached him and suggested that he ask a question. Upon looking around, he observed approximately 30 people dressed similarly to himself, and wondered if they were engaging in a ritual for rain or some other purpose. Despite this, he continued with his magic spell. Growing frustrated, Lloyd Frontera inquired why his question was being ignored. He questioned whether he was currently being treated as if he were invisible. The thought crossed his mind that he might have scared the individual, considering how unattractive he appeared. He reasoned that he mustn't move at this moment, as any slight movement of his mouth could ruin everything. As he walked away, Lloyd Frontera decided to treat him as an invisible person and determined to see how long he could feign ignorance. While attempting to strike the person with a scar using his shovel, it unexpectedly turned, resulting in a crack. Undeterred, the person with the scar smiled, prompting him to realize that the magical protection of steel cast by Cannavaro was in effect, rendering a mere shovel ineffective. Realizing the situation, he unleashed his powers, attacking with fire and causing the person with the scar to become frightened. Lloyd Frontera examines his shovel. The person with the scar considers how foolish it is, noting that the magic's defense power is absolute, and Lloyd won't even be able to scratch it.